Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Talking Cardboard. As you can see, today is a special episode because I am alone. I am doing my first ever Top Games video, my personal favorite top 50 games of all time. Like I said, this is my personal favorite list of all time, personal being my opinion. Definitely leave comments below. I'd like to hear what everybody else has to say about my opinions and my personal taste on games, and we'll go from there. Alright, let's start on game number 50. Number 50 on my list is a fairly new one to me. I purchased this game around 5 or 6 months ago, but I've gotten many plays of this game in since I purchased it. It is a great game that on its surface looks like a racing game, but when you break it down to its simple core and mechanisms, it's more of a gambling game where you bet on cars as they go around the track, and the better you can foresee how the cars are going to do by the end of the game, the more money you get, thus that is how you win. So my game number 50, you may have guessed it by now, is Downforce by Restoration Games. Like I said, in Downforce, you do purchase your own vehicle or vehicles, up to 2 cars in the game, and they race around the track. There are 3 different lines around the track that are betting points. You've got bid number 1, bid number 2, bid number 3, and on each, after the first car passes each one of those lines throughout the game, you could keep your bet the same on who you think is going to win. You could change your bet mid-game based on how the different cars are either pulling further ahead or falling further behind. But this is definitely, it's less of a racing game as it might seem on the surface, and more of a betting game, but it's definitely a good one. Nice and light, not too heavy, family weight, but definitely works for gamers in my game group as well. My number 50, Downforce. Alright, and now on to my number 49. My number 49 was a little bit of a surprise to me. When I first did my research on the game before looking to purchase the game, I was on the fence about it. I knew I'm a huge fan of Euro style games, but for whatever reason, I've never been too into tile placement games, and this one seemed more like a tile placement style game that I might not have been too into. But the further research I did and the further looking into it I did on this game, it just seemed to speak more and more volumes to something I might like. My number 49 is Heaven and Ale. So like I said, this was a huge surprise to me. It's more of a rondel style game where you've got a track that goes around in a circle. You've got your own guy that you're basically pushing your luck with how far you want to go with it. It's one of those games where once you go to a certain point on the track, you cannot work your way back. So you really want to be careful with how far you move your person to take the tile, because once you pass over a tile that you may have decided you could have needed, your opportunity to get that tile has then passed. So in this game, like I said, you're using one of your, almost like a meeple, to go around a track or around a circle, and when you stop on certain points, you can either pick up the monk tiles or different resource tiles, because although the theme is really light in this game, it's basically you're hiring monks to brew beer. I guess it's a very light, thin layered theme on the game here, but as you pick up tiles or pick up monks or pick up various things along the track, you are then placing it on your own player board. There's a shady side to the board and a sunny side to the board. If you place the tile on the shady side, you can trigger that tile in the future for money. If you place the tile on the sunny side, when you trigger that tile in the future, it's more for victory points or for gaining resources of that type. Very unique endgame scoring mechanism in this game as well. You basically take you bunch all the resources together and you take your weakest resource out of all of them at the end of the game and you multiply it by your end game multiplier. So you really want to make sure that all of your resources that you're using to make your beer are all somewhat equal, or you can scoot it up to be as far along as possible, because you are only taking your least valuable resource to multiply by your endgame multiplier. Very unique mechanism, or at least unique to me. I haven't seen many games do that, but definitely a fun one. That is Heaven and Ale. All right, and on to my number 48. My number 48 favorite game of all time is the first game on my list that is a party game. It's actually one that when I first bought, we didn't get to the table very often. It seemed like any other party game out there at the time. It didn't seem as unique as some of the other games we were picking up to play in a party setting. I still did obviously buy the game because I thought it was unique enough to give our game night some added flavor. But my number 48 favorite game of all time is this little guy here called Werewords. So, like I said, Werewords, on the surface it seems like it's just another Resistance style game, which in a way it's very similar, except for it's more of 20 questions. So you've got a bunch of villagers and some werewolves, and I believe the town mayor is the person who's the head of the table in this game, where you've got this secret word, and the app that comes with this game, or the app that you can download on your phone or your tablet or whichever electronic device you use for the game, is very cool. It actually generates a random word on the phone, and the mayor can see what that word is, and then the seer can see the word, nobody else can, and you've got basically and then the werewolves can see the word as well, but the villagers cannot. And you basically are asking the mayor, you go around the table asking the mayor yes or no questions. Like, is this object red? Is it a food item? Is this a noun? Is it person, place, thing? So you're asking yes or no questions, and the mayor has to answer either yes, no, maybe. There's a tile that says, oh, you're so close, or yes, you are correct. And as you're getting closer and closer to what that word is by asking those yes or no questions, it gets more and more interesting, because you're looking around the table at who could know the words, if they're a werewolf or not, who might not know the words, who might be trying to throw off the whole scheme of the pattern of who knows the word and who doesn't know the word. So it's very interesting in that way. But basically, somewhat of another social deduction type game, but with a unique word, and the app is very nice to have for it as well. It is actually required, but that is my number 48, Werewords. All right, and my number 47 favorite game of all time is a very simple game on its surface, but definitely has enough meat there on the bones to require some thinking, some logical thinking, and it's more of kind of a puzzly game. Let's just show you what it is. My number 47 is Reef. So I actually didn't hear a whole lot about this game before I purchased it. Very little research was done. The artwork is very gorgeous artwork. That was about half the battle to get me interested in it, but even right off the bat, without knowing anything about it, the artwork really grabbed me, so that was definitely a positive. And then I did a little bit more research into it, and it's simply, you either take a card from the center row of cards, or you play a card out of your hand. So these different cards have different reef pieces on it, and also different patterns of reef pieces that give you victory points. So, for example, when you take a card out of the center, you might be building your hand up toward comboing with what else is in your hand. When you play a card down, you get the two reef pieces that are specific to what the card shows on the top half of the card, and then on the bottom half of the card, it has a pattern of different reef pieces, or a different requirement. Maybe your red reef has to be a certain height, or you have to have an L shape of this type of reef in order to score that. If you don't meet that requirement, you don't score the victory points. You are still allowed to play the card for those reef pieces. You gather them, immediately place them on your board. Let's see, it is a 4x4 grid, so it's got 16 different squares where you're placing them out. So if you don't meet the requirement on the bottom half, you just don't get the victory points, but you still get to place the pieces. If you do meet the requirement on the bottom half of the card, like I said, if you have a certain pattern of a certain reef, you immediately score those number of victory points. What makes it really cool is that you can build toward huge combos or huge amount of points if you have a couple different variations of that same pattern, because it can be oriented in different ways. You can still score points. It doesn't matter how it's oriented on your board. But yeah, that's great. You build up your board towards certain combos. You might have three different shapes of what your requirement is, let's say for 3 victory points, but because you have 3 of them strategically placed on your board before you played that card, you're allowed to score that 3 times for a total of 9 victory points. Very cool, very neat decision making, very light, fast, fun to play, and one I would definitely suggest for not only friends and family, but for hardcore gamers, light core gamers. Honestly, this one could definitely be a gateway style game that could get some non-gamers into the gaming hobby. Reef, definitely one I'd give a try. That is my number 47. All right, and then on to my number 46. My number 46th favorite game of all time is another party game on the list. A lot of these party games might be kind of bunched up toward the end of this top 50. Doesn't mean they're bad by all means. It just means there's 40 other games that are better, but this is definitely another party game not to be missed. One of my favorite party games of all time. Let me just show it to you here. Kind of an odd theme, but I love it. And that game is When I Dream. When I Dream is a really cool game, really neat components. You've got this really cool heavy plastic bed frame that holds these stack of cards with different artwork on it, and each card has one word on that card. What makes this party game so unique, and it scares off some people to a certain extent because it does come with a sleeping mask, like blindfold in the game. So some people don't want to wear it, some people get a little bit iffy about it. I don't know why, but yeah, so one person puts on the sleeping mask so they cannot see what the word on the cards are. The rest of the players get a random card shuffled. You shuffle them together, give them a random roll card. So you've got fairies, who are the good people. You have the boogeyman, which is the bad person. You have the sandman, who is kind of neutral. But based on what card roll you get is what kind of clues you are giving to the person who cannot see the cards, the person who has the sleeping mask on. So they are completely blindfolded, and you go around the table giving them one-word clues that has to do with that one word on the card in the center of the table. So if you're a fairy, you want to give very obvious clues as to what that card is. For example, if the card said house on it, if I'm a fairy, I could say living, and then another person who's a fairy could say here. Like trying to get them to guess that we're living in this place, you know, currently somebody lives here, to try to get them to guess house. Some bad examples on my part. I probably could have done a little bit better on that, but you get the idea. But mixed in, which is real creative, are some boogeymen. And if you have a boogeyman card, you're trying to give a clue that's somewhat similar, but just enough to throw them off. So if the card was house and I was a boogeyman, I might want to say wooden, or let's say another boogeyman would say forest, and try to get to lead them down the wrong path, trying to think of something that's wooden in the forest and try to get them off track from what a house might be. I mean, a house can be made out of wood, that's just fine, but if you're working together with the other boogeymen around the table, they can definitely feed off of your energy and your clues to try to get them away from the correct card. So basically, it's a quick, fun, light game. You go around the table. Each person gets one opportunity with the sleeping mask on to guess what the cards are. After they do their one guess of what the card is, whether or not they said the right word or not, you take the card off the stack. You either place it on the fairy side or on the boogeyman side if they got the card right or wrong. And after a certain set of time, the time is up. They can recount the dream on what cards they think they guessed correctly to get some extra bonus points. But basically, depending on how well you did as a fairy or as a boogeyman or as the person with the sleeping mask guessing the words is how many victory points you get. Very light fun. I don't know if I explained it very well at all, but it's definitely one of my favorite party games. Definitely one to check out, and that is When I Dream. All right, and on to my number 45. My number 45 is a game that started with actually a different game in my collection that I eventually sold off to one of the other members in our group. Still a game I love. It was just way too similar to keep both games, and I had to choose one, so I chose this game that I'm about to talk about. But really, I'm going to group both of these games together under the same number 45. They're very similar in style, and I could definitely take one or the other in my collection and be happy keeping both. Well, not both at the same time, but be happy keeping one of them, no matter what the decision is. And that game is Century Spice Road. So the other game I was talking about that I sold off is Splendor, which is very, very similar. A lot of people say Century Spice Road is a Splendor killer. In my opinion, not really. I still really enjoy Splendor a lot. If I didn't sell the game, I would, be glad to still have it. If Century Spice Road never came out, I would be happy with Splendor just fine. So I'm actually going to group both of those games together. I would say either Century Spice Road or Splendor. In Century Spice Road, let's talk a little bit about that though. For those of you who don't know Century Spice Road, it's another simpler game where you've got a hand of cards that you either play to collect different spices, or you play some cards allow you to convert spices into other things. So you might be able to take a few spices and convert them into, let's say 3 spices, and convert them into 2 better spices, or maybe 1 of the really good spices to try to get these different combinations of spices. So basically, you are building a pool of spices. I believe you can only hold a maximum of 10 at one time before you have to spend them on victory point cards. But as you are gathering spices and converting spices into different spices, I don't know, am I up to 150 times saying spice by now? Probably. But that's what this game is all about, is getting those spices, converting them to other spices to turn them in to collect victory point cards on your caravan. And when you fulfill the requirement of the specific spices you need, and you might need 3 red, 1 brown, 1 green, and 2 yellow for 20 victory points. When you have that requirement, you can turn them in and take that card. Very simple, light fun. Use this more as a filler game. Definitely not a game that you'd use for your main game of the night or the main event, but definitely one where you can gladly throw it in as the last game of the night, or throw it in between a couple heavier games, and it definitely scratches that itch. Let's see, we've got 30 to 45 minutes, it says on the box, 2 to 5 players. It definitely plays once you know the game more in that 30-minute range. So that's definitely some quick, nice, light fun with some great crunchy decision making with your cards. And that is Century Spice Road. All right, my number 44 favorite game of all time is another party game. Yet another party game, not one to be missed though. This game I've owned for at least a couple of years now, almost since it was first released by the publisher, and it's been a hit at every party I've brought it to. I haven't brought it out as much recently. It is a harder game to get into or grasp the concept of. Not to give away any spoilers, but it is a harder game to grasp its concept. Let me just show you what the game is. Yes, that's right. It is Concept. So basically what you have is you turn over a card. If you're the active player, you've got some easier, medium, or hard words listed on the card. You choose one of those words or one of those sentences to get all the other players around the table to guess what that phrase is, or what that sentence or what that word is that you chose on the card. So it's hidden, it's in secret, only you know what that word or phrase is, and you are trying to get them to guess. The only thing is the only thing you're allowed to say is yes. You can't say no, you can't explain to them what's going on or what you're doing. All you have is a board with a bunch of different symbols on it, and you're placing pieces on those symbols to try to give them clues at what your word or phrase or sentence is. But you can't say no, or oh, you're way off. It's, you know, I'm thinking more like this, and you can't say anything. All you can say is the word yes. And giving those clues using only symbols that are on the board. So you've got a bunch of different symbols. You've got some that mean animals, and different symbols that have all the different colors on it, and some symbols that give you a clue if it's a movie or an actor or a fantasy person, or, you know, a nonfiction character, whether or not they're big, small, you know, skinny. All these different clues on the board, just a mashup of a bunch of different symbols. After a certain amount of time, if they've guessed your word or phrase correctly, you have won. We really don't keep points or score in this game. They have little light bulb tokens that you can use for victory points based on how well you did, how hard of a word possibly you chose and that they guessed correctly. You get a certain number of victory points for it, and after you go around the table a certain number of times, you then stop the game, and whoever has the most points wins. But it hardly ever gets to that. Anytime I bring it to the table, any party I've ever brought it to, I've played with so many different groups of people, it has always worked well. It has never fell flat. And yeah, it's just a great game all around. It might take a game or two for people to grasp the concept and to understand what they're doing, and they might want to give up right away because it is such a hard game at first. But once you get the hang of it, this game really sings, and is just an awesome game all around. Definitely one I would like to recommend, and that is Concept. Okay, my number 43. Number 43 was a bit of a surprise to me as well. I don't know if I'm just bad at deciding what I would like. You'd think after doing this for over 10 years, being a part of this awesome hobby for 10 plus years now, I would know what I like, but apparently with some things I'm a little bit on the fence about, and it just so happened I chose this. I found this game at Target, and the theme alone just kind of struck me and just kind of stood out to me, and I had to get it and give it a shot, and I really enjoy this game. This game is a Disney game called Villainous. My wife doesn't like it as much. We both love Disney, like Disney movies, love going to Disney World down in Florida and all that great stuff. But the game didn't really sing to her as much as it did to me. But Villainous, in my opinion, is a great game. As you can see, it's my number 43 favorite game of all time, and it just came out recently, so it's a fairly new game. It jumped really high on my list right away. So in Villainous, you take the role of one of the Disney villains. And based on the villain you choose to use, you have a different end game goal or a different mission from everyone else at the table. So you might be Captain Hook or Maleficent or Jafar from Aladdin. You've got Ursula, Prince John, the Queen of Hearts. This is just the base game. I can't imagine they won't come out with an expansion with more of these villains. I believe there's already talk about it, but anyway, in this base box you have plenty of villains to work with, and like I said, each villain has their own end game way to win. So you've got your own player board with different areas on it that have various actions. You've got your pawn, so your villain pawn, that you can choose to put on one of those areas to do those actions. Except for one of the villains, the other ones go by the normal rules of the game, where you cannot keep your pawn on the same area for the same actions turn after turn. You continuously have to move it to each different area for actions, but some of them give you money, some of the actions give you more cards. There's this cool deck of cards where you can play, like it's called the Fate deck, where you can play Fate on the other players, which they have to possibly complete, or it'll slow them down from their main objective. and really kind of hinder their play. So there's a little bit of take that in this game, a little bit of confrontation. If you don't like that, it's not too heavy in this game, so I don't think it'll be enough to turn you off from the game. What seemingly looks like at the back of the box more of a light-hearted game, but it's definitely a gamer's game. It being at Target, you don't see that very often. You don't see Target games coming out that are not as family friendly, especially with a Disney theme on it, like Villainous. It's definitely a heavier game in my opinion than what looks to be on the box, but I don't know. If you're looking for kind of that next step game, something a little bit heavier than a gateway game, I would definitely give this a shot. And I think you'll really enjoy it. Might be a miss for some people, but for me, it's definitely an awesome game and a great find, and one that's probably one of my top surprises of the year, or I guess of 2018, now that we're in 2019. Definitely one of my top surprises, and that is Villainous. All right, my number 42 game. My number 42 game is a card game at heart. It's got a little board that lays in front of you to put some of your cards on one side and some of the other specific faction cards on the other side of the board, and that'll trigger different things. But at its heart, it is simply a card game, an engine building card game. So the better you build out your engine of cards, and the better you get that wheel turning, and the better it's all greased together and working as one whole mechanism, the better off it works, and the better off you are. And how many more times can I say better? But anyway, this game is Imperial Settlers, a game I've owned for quite a while now. It's been a mainstay in my collection. I don't ever see it leaving. I have a couple of the expansions as well that add a different faction for each expansion you get, that gives you different mechanisms, or different core mechanisms for each faction. But like I said, you've got a little board in front of you that has one side of it for more of your basic general cards that generate resources and help move your engine further along with what you are building toward. And then you've got the other side of your board where you actually recruit or build different houses or different faction cards from your hand that are worth more points, or that trigger victory points in various ways, but are much more expensive to place out, that usually have a cost that you have to destroy one of your basic cards in order to put it out, along with some resources just to generate those victory points. But you don't want to necessarily do that too soon, because as soon as you start destroying your general cards or your more basic cards, the more your engine breaks down. The slower you generate resources, the less your mechanisms sing and are cohesive as one. So you want to be very careful at your timing, when you build your faction cards for points, when to hold off, when to build more basic cards, when to take cards and to hold on to your hand and build resources for a bigger play later in the round. A lot of crunchy, meaty decisions to make in this game, although it is just a card game at heart. I know Imperial Settlers got a lot of love when it first came out too, and it's a mainstay in my collection. I don't think it'll ever leave the collection. It definitely scratches the itch that I need it to, as far as a nice, light, card-driven engine builder game, and that is exactly where it fits nicely into my collection. So that is it there, Imperial Settlers. My number 41 game, I feel like hardly anybody ever talks about. I don't see it being played. I don't see it being talked about. I never hear about it online. You Google it and it might say this game doesn't even exist. I'm just kidding on that part of it, but you know what I mean. I never hear this game being talked about. Well, let's start talking about the game a little bit. Let's pull it up here. And that game is called Coal Baron. So this game is somewhat of a worker placement game where you've got different spots on the board for money. You've got different spots where you produce more coal, and basically, as the name suggests, Coal Baron, you are actually building up your own personal coal mine. So you've got an elevator shaft. The components are real cool because the elevator actually fits right in its own cardboard slot that actually slides up and down as the elevator moves up and down. And you've got these different spots where you can purchase coal cars and place it within your mine. Depending on how rare the coal is or the mineral is that you purchase, depends on where it goes in your mine. And you've got another spot on the worker placement board that'll actually give you actions, either like 7 actions or 10 actions. And what you can do with those actions is actually shift the elevator 1 spot down for each action, 1 spot up for each action, and or shift coal from its coal cars onto the elevator. And the whole purpose for that is to try to maximize what you're buying, the amount of coal you're purchasing, with getting that coal strategically placed and back up to the top of the mine shaft in order to get it transported away to fulfill contracts. You've got these different contracts that you can purchase that have different requirements for various color coal and minerals to fulfill those, and they give you victory points if you can fulfill the exact requirement. This game is really cool with its worker placement too, where if you go to a spot with one of your workers to take an action, then the next person to go there has to then use 1 more worker than is what is currently on that spot. So if you go there with 1 worker, somebody has to use 2 workers to use that spot next. And then if you want to use that again, let's say they place their 2 workers to bump you off, then you would have to use 3 of your workers to go to that same spot if you want to use that space in a future turn. So it's really cool how that works. You've got a whole pile of workers that you use for different worker placement spots in this game, but they do dwindle down real quick because of that mechanism. You have to be real careful when people start blocking you and blocking back and forth to have to use more and more and more workers to then place on that same spot. But eventually you fulfill your contracts. Just a very solid game, one that I believe should be talked about a lot more. If you like Euro games, if you like maximizing movement with contracts, I know contracts is popular in my household and with my wife. We love games that require you to fulfill certain contracts. Then you would definitely love Coal Baron. One to give a try. Highly recommend it. My number 41, Coal Baron. All right, and I want to thank everyone for watching. I appreciate you sticking through if you're one of those people that stuck through this entire video. But I hope you enjoyed my list. I hope it will trigger some questions and some talk down in the comments. I'd love to hear what other people's favorite games are. Maybe it's a game I've never heard of. Maybe it's a game I've been wanting to try and haven't tried yet. I haven't played all the games, but I'm definitely on a quest to play all the games that I can. And that's all I have for now. Thanks again for watching, and talk to you later.